Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to the first in a series of special live webinars being broadcast by Zero Waste Scotland on behalf of the Scottish Government. My name is Catherine Bozek and I work in the communications team here at Zero Waste Scotland, and I'll be your host for today. First of all, can I just say thank you for joining us on such a sunny day and also such a quiet news day. It's a pleasure to have your company. Today we'll be exploring the current public consultations that have been launched by Scottish Government in May for a circular economy in Scotland. There are two complementary consultations that we'll be exploring today, the first being Delivering a Circular Economy Bill, and the second, Proposals for Delivering a Circular Economy, a route map to 2025 and beyond. And we'll be taking your questions live on both consultations today. We're calling this series of webinars Living Circular because essentially that's what the consultations aim to achieve, shifting our way of life in Scotland to a more circular economy. I'm delighted to welcome to this broadcast today our panel of guest speakers, and I'd just like to ask them to introduce themselves in turn. So if I could turn to you first, Jane. Oh, I think Jane is temporarily just frozen, so maybe we'll skip along to Kate.
Hello everyone, my name's Kate Chambers. I am here today representing the 2050 Climate Group. 2050 Climate Group is a youth-led charity that is working with 18 to 35-year-olds living and working in Scotland and encouraging them to take climate action in a way that's meaningful to them, whether that's in their personal life, in their community, in their professional life, in the businesses that they work in, or in the political sphere of influence. And as a charity, we're really excited to be invited along today and to see these two consultations coming out, and we'll be gathering responses from across our network.
That's great, Kate, thank you. Michael?
Hi, I'm Michael Cook. I'm with Circular Communities Scotland. We're a membership body, that's what it says on the tin, per our name really, for charities and social enterprises in Scotland who are delivering a more circular economy, reuse, repair, recycling. And we're funded by Zero Waste Scotland to do that core element of our work and lots of other exciting things besides. And we're really positive about this opportunity that the Circular Economy Bill and the route map presents to deliver a more circular behaviours in Scotland.
That's great to hear, Michael. That's great to hear, Michael, as are we at Zero Waste Scotland. I'll hand over now to Sam.
Hi everyone, I'm Sam Moyer. I work at Zero Waste Scotland and I manage the reuse and repair projects at Zero Waste Scotland. In the main, that's the Revolve certification scheme, which aims to enhance the reuse experience across Scotland and support all the reuse sector. But there's a number of other projects I'm working on at the moment as well, mostly geared towards making reuse more mainstream across Scotland in the future and large-scale reuse projects.
That's wonderful, thanks Sam. And Jane, you're back, which is great. Last but not least.
Hi there, I'm Jane Beasley and I'm the project lead for the route map for Zero Waste Scotland and also leading on the consumption package.
It's very important that you're with us, Jane, so I'm glad that you managed to get back. These things always have a little bit of a hiccup when they go live. So yeah, we are being broadcast live today, but the webinar is also being recorded. So if you do have to dash off before the end and get your lunchtime walk in, then that's absolutely fine. You can watch back later on. But if you are staying for the whole session, we would encourage you to ask a question because that's what the session is about, engaging with our audience. So please do feel free to comment or question in the live feed on whichever platform you happen to be viewing on. You can also use the hashtag Living Circular on Twitter, or you could send us an email to livingcircular@zerowastescotland.org.uk, and I'm delighted to see that some questions have already started to come in. The format for today's session will be as follows. In a moment, I'm going to hand over to Jane, our policy lead for the route map, who's going to first of all just broadly introduce the contents of the CE Bill and route map consultations, and then we'll have a quick question and answer session on that. And then in the latter part of the webinar, we'll take a deeper dive into package 1 of the route map specifically, which is about responsible consumption, production and reuse, and ask some questions to our panel on that particular package. So without further ado, I'll now hand over to Jane for part 1.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Okay, that's brilliant. I was just about to say my screen is frozen, but I can see the slide, so that's fabulous. So welcome everybody. This is the first of our lunchtime webinars. We are focusing on a number of specific areas or themes within the route map and the circular economy bill. So I'm going to start by giving you a really quick kind of walk through the principles of both consultation documents and provide a little bit of context to the discussions that we're having at the moment in this space. So the route map and the circular economy bill, as Catherine's pointed out, they are complementary consultations. They go hand in hand, and they're designed to help move us from this take, make and dispose model to a much more circular way of living, so keeping materials in use for longer. So the need to speed up and make progress in changing how we do things, it's really, really apparent, and actually it's become much more pressing over recent years, and we acknowledge that, and that's one of the reasons why we've put these consultations out now. We're very aware that around 4/5 of Scotland's carbon footprint comes from the products and services that we manufacture, use and throw away. And equally, we recognise that about 90% of global biodiversity loss and water stress is caused by resource extraction and processing. So therefore, we acknowledge we do need to act. And whilst progress has been made in this space, we actually do need to do more, and we need to do it at speed. Looking first at the route map. So the route map sets out how we intend to kind of deliver our system-wide approach, our vision for the Scottish circular economy moving forward, building on achievements and actions that have been already in place and already underway. And we're really focusing on existing waste and recycling targets up to 2025, and then looking beyond in terms of some of the wider measures to develop more circular systems and support our larger sort of carbon long-term ambitions. So the route map really is a call to action, and it's across a wide range of stakeholders. We do recognise that we need to work together to bring about the change required. We can't do this on our own. It's not down to a particular sector or group or organisations. It's all of us having to come together and coordinate our forces and coordinate our strengths and our activities. If you've had a chance to look through the content already, you will notice that there is a do, develop, investigate framework approach that's been applied to the actions. So this principally recognises that not all of the policy measures are fully ready to be implemented in Scotland. So some need further research or refining, and some need more work on their sort of feasibility within a Scottish setting. And we're working through some of those aspects at the moment as well. And finally, the route map specifies legislative requirements to give us the powers to act. This is indicated within the route map by a little cross next to the interventions and measures, and that shows the linkages across to the Circular Economy Bill. In terms of the packages, the route map's been arranged into 7 distinct packages of action. So this session today, we're going to look into more detail in package 1, and we'll come on to that in a little while. Package 2 is reducing food waste. This is very much aligned to the food waste reduction action plan. So it addresses the whole food system. It looks at how we can reset our attitude to food waste. It looks at how we can enhance our circular bioeconomy, and principally give us better data as well to understand our progress, understand where our limitations are and where we need to intervene more, where we need a bit more action and support. Package 3 is improving recycling from households. So there is a really big focus on making recycling much easier, making it the principal action above disposal, but then also moving up the hierarchy, looking at reuse, looking at prevention. It's about improving performance across the piece. So it's designing and delivering services that maximise higher performing services and achieve much more consistency across services. It's really about sharing that good practice and providing support where it's needed across local authorities, and putting people at the heart of the system and working out what's going to generate good behaviour, what's going to generate that positive sort of mood shift and change. It's about embedding decisions in about recycling in the design and sale of products, and it's about looking at how we can increase that transparency and generate that confidence that we need in the recycling process. Package number 4 is about improving recycling from commercial businesses. So this is focused on looking at commercial data, looking at trying to get a clearer picture of what's going on out there, what's in the residual waste streams, what can we do more with, how can we move things up the hierarchy, so we've got much more focus on prevention and reuse. It's about incentivizing commercial businesses to increase their reuse activity and their recycling activity, and look at where the support needs are. So looking at how we can put support in at collection level, how we can tackle waste crime, how we can look at enforcement opportunities. Package 5 is embedding circular construction practices. So there's significant focus in here on reuse. So reusing materials that are already in the system, and also looking therefore at embodied carbon. So we want to improve collaboration between government and industry. We know there's good practice going on out there. It tends to be niche. It's not mainstream. So we need to challenge that. We need to try and bring it so it's common practice. we want to look at how we can incentivise more sustainable practices across the construction sector and bring that best practice across the board and improve our understanding of why best practice isn't being implemented. In package 6, minimising the impact of disposal, we accept that there will still be some material that does require disposal, so we want to make sure materials are managed in the right way. We want to encourage innovation. We want to explore the scope of how we can have a much more targeted approach with fiscal instruments. And we really just want to have a look at how we can promote a better picture overall and a bit of stability for the sector as well. Package 7 is cross-cutting measures. So this brings in the strategic interventions. So this is a circular economy strategy within the circular economy bill. It's the monitoring framework. It's the associated targets. It's also research, data and evidence. We want to prove, we want an evidence-led approach. We want to consider why we're taking particular steps, how we can overcome some barriers, how we can address some of the challenges out there. So there's research on prevention, behaviour change, fiscal incentives, and looking at material-specific priorities. We're also targeting sustainable procurement. The public purse is a pretty substantial purse, and we recognise the importance that procurement can play in really delivering practices in a much more circular fashion. And skills and training, definitely last but not least, the need for greater uptake in green skills and the real opportunities that presents. Moving on now to the Circular Economy Bill. So the route map identifies a range of interventions and sets that clear pathway for us for the next 5 to 10 years. The bill, on the other hand, includes the legislative provisions that would help deliver some of those interventions that are being set out in the route map, but it also extends in other areas. It's not exclusively just the vehicle for the route map. So the programme for government in 21-22, that set out the commitment to bring forward a CE bill. And the whole principle behind it is to facilitate an economy which reduces the demand for raw materials, designs products to last as long as possible, and encourage reuse, repair and recycling. So this consultation builds on previous measures that have been put forward for discussion, but also introduces a range of new measures, which does include, but isn't exclusively, the legislative provisions for the route map. In terms of the focus of the Circular Economy Bill, as I've said, it isn't just exclusively about the route map, but it's principally delivering the legislative requirements for that. It is split into 4 sections. We've got strategic interventions. These are looking at the circular economy strategy obligation. It's also looking at the statutory targets. So within the route map, you'll see reference to a range of different statutory targets that have been proposed. It's got a reduce and reuse section, which includes measures to ban the destruction of unsold durable goods, which does feature within the first package. Also environmental charging for single-use items and mandatory reporting of waste and surplus. Again, we'll go into those in a bit more detail in a minute. Recycle, which is about strengthening the approach to the household recycling charter, looking at how we can use targets to support recycling performance and thinking about duty of cares for householders and addressing business recycling. And then the last group is littering and improving enforcement. So this is specifically focused on littering from vehicles and seizure of vehicles involved in waste crime. Don't worry if this is tricky to read the content clearly. This diagram does feature in both the route map and the CE Bill documents. It does provide a useful illustration, I think, of a snapshot of what's in train at the moment and what's being proposed in this space. It's not everything. We really did want to have a diagram that included everything, but we just couldn't do it. We spoke to designers, there was just too much. So this is the kind of snapshot of the kind of key headline things. There's a couple of things to draw from this really. Firstly, single measures are not enough. We know that. There's no sort of silver bullet solution to the problems that we're facing. So the interactions between the packages and between the measures that are being proposed within the route map and also the CE Bill, they're really important to drive change, and we need that kind of interaction. Some of them are enabling, some of them underpin, some of them help drive that direction. There's also a significant amount of activity taking place up to 25 and a real mix of measures. Again, some are direct intervention measures requiring that legislative slant, others are just actions, and that can be taken forward quite quickly. And there's a lot of work packages that are already underway in 22 and 23, which are helping propel us and helping us make that progress that we need to make. And finally, it's worth noting that, we see these consultation documents as a real start of a national conversation. We have made some strong progress in reducing emissions in the waste and resource sector over the last 20 years. We know there's still a way to go. We've made some significant strides in our efforts to really start to look at Scotland's throwaway culture and promote recycling and move up the hierarchy. We feel the bill will increase the levers that we've got available to us, and the route map sets out the actions to accelerate that progress. So take us at speed in a much sort of quicker direction of travel to where we need to be. We do recognise that the circular economy and the waste policy is a really complex landscape. We know it's a very busy space out there at the moment. We're trying to pull the things and tie the things together, and actually that's we're going through that process at the moment. During consultation, we're making sure we're reflecting and we're looking at where those interactions lie. And we know we need both legislative and non-legislative measures, and I think that's reflected again in both consultation documents. Finally, we need you. We need you to share your views. We need you to share your expertise with us. We need to work together. What we come out with at the end has to be fit for purpose. It has to take us where we need to go, and we have to do it collectively. So we need you to take part in these consultations. And hopefully today, and the questions that you raised with us is just a start. We would like you to formally take part in the consultations, and I can't stress that enough, and really hope that you take the time to do that. I will stop talking now. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane, for such a succinct summary of what are two very lengthy consultation documents. That was really helpful, and I'm sure that will inspire some questions. Indeed, we already have had a couple that have come in, so if you wouldn't mind taking these. First one being, why is there the need for two separate consultations?
That's a good question. So essentially, the route map sets out everything that we think we need to do, but some of those measures and interventions require primary legislation. So the CE bill is our vehicle to do that, as well as bringing forward some other measures. So that's why there's two. One is the legislative tool for us. The other is all our kind of actions, measures, and interventions that we feel are really important. So things that you see within the route map, you will also see that crossover in the CE bill, but then there are some additional elements in there too.
Okay, and with that in mind then, we've had a question here from Victoria. Which consultation should stakeholders seek to complete? Which is the most important? If you could put one on top of the other.
I mean, I would say look at both. Don't feel you have to respond to every single question in both. I know it can be quite onerous, and people are quite time poor with day jobs. So have a look through both, prioritize where your interests and expertise lie, and focus in on those questions that you want to share your views with us. If you really support an intervention, but you're actually concerned about how it'll be delivered, talk to us. Tell us how you feel we should consider the kind of steps, the next steps for that. If you don't like an approach that's been put forward, again, share it with us. Share with us your expertise. If you've got references and other sort of support documents that tell us, there are some challenges with this, please do share. So look at both, but choose according to, I guess, where your interests and experiences lie.
Thanks, Jane. And just opening up this next question to the whole panel, perhaps I could come to you first, Michael. In terms of the overall package of measures which are being proposed, do you think they will help in meeting our targets and in our journey towards net zero?
Well, they have to, don't they? There's not that's something we have to work together. I mean, I want to resonate with something Jane said. No one person can solve it by themselves. We have to work together. And so I think, I mean, the simple answer is yes. I think they will. There's a lot of measures in there that will help increase recycling, will help increase reuse, will help tackle consumption. So that's good news. But I think it falls on all of us that work in this space and the people dialing into this who are thinking about responding to the consultation. I think, well, let's work together to make sure it does, would be my sort of positive message. If we think there's areas it could be stronger, let's say that, as Jane said. And I think together we can make sure that it does. I mean, my final comment on it would be, my son's 18, and I was reflecting for an article recently that I remember the day he was born, like yesterday or the day before maybe. In 18 years' time, we're almost on the verge of when we've committed to be net zero. That same length of time, which was really shocking for me when I thought of that. So my basic answer is we have to, because it's 23 years away is when our target for net zero is. And if 82% of our carbon footprint comes from the stuff that we buy and dispose of, and the products and services, and we've got to tackle that. And how do we do that? It's the circular economy. And so we need it to.
Thanks, Michael. Thinking of the analogy you used with your son, that's a nice link into Kate's organisation representing the Climate 2050 Youth Group. Do you have anything you'd like to comment on, Kate, in terms of the measures and supporting us in our journey towards net zero? Do they go far enough?
Yeah, just to kind of build on what Michael was saying, obviously for a lot of the young people that we work with, we don't know anything but a linear economy and sort of disposable culture. And that's something that's really hard to break, as well as the kind of culture aspect. When you've always lived in an economy that's built on that take, make, dispose model. But I think the young people that we work with and speak to every day, they are really passionate about seeing that change of culture, but also understanding that it has to be an accessible transition to circularity. So how do we ensure that we take people with us, that it doesn't become more expensive to engage with the circular economy? And how do we ensure that young people who are maybe just leaving school see potential for their career within the circular economy? So Jane touched on the role of green skills in this transition, and I think that's what we're seeing from a lot of the young people that we speak to. They want to work in a sector where they're contributing to our net zero targets. But a lot of the time when you're a young graduate or you're going into an apprenticeship, you don't feel like you have the agency and power to influence. So that's something we work hard with our young people, is to actually give them the power to speak up in their workplaces or colleges and universities to actually see that transition happening faster. So I think this is a great opportunity for anyone within that age group to actually have your voice heard in this consultation process.
Absolutely, and it's great to have you here to represent the views. Sam, is there anything you'd like to add on that discussion around meeting targets?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. This is about transformative change, isn't it? And it's really interesting to think about the next generation and how some people have grown up, because my son's 13 and actually he's been involved in the conversation we've been having for the last 13 years. So he's grown up knowing that we have this situation in the linear economy, but actually there's a lot of conversation going on, and he's been involved in climate marches and sort of sees that things have to change. So that's really positive. But, the consultation is really about what are the big things that we need to put in place just to make those really, big changes, that we're serious about this now, I think is essentially what they're saying.
Absolutely. And other questions come in before we go on to part two, Jane, if I could just put this one to yourself. In terms of responding to the consultation, are responses published, and how is information as part of the consultation process used?
Good question. Okay, so Scottish Government will be collating all of the responses. Depending on whether you anonymise yourself will depend on whether we can see who has responded in what manner. The responses then will be shared with partners. So actually for the route map, it's a partnership project between Scottish Government, Zero Waste Scotland and SEPA. And so we're all working together, and we'll use the responses that come through there. With the CE bill, it's a slightly different process because it's a statutory tool, but again, we play a supporting role for Scottish Government within there. So we will take the responses, we'll analyse them, we'll look through them, we'll use them to help shape the next stage document, to be honest. So we're very, very keen for as many responses to come in as possible, so we can get this in the best shape possible.
That's great, thanks Jane. There's no other questions for the moment on part one, so I think if we just move on to package one of the route map in a bit more detail, and don't forget to submit your questions on the feed wherever you're watching, or using email livingcircular@zerowastescotland.org.uk or the hashtag livingcircular on Twitter. So over to you, Jane, for part two.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to take a bit of a deeper dive now into package one, which I'm guessing why most of you are here today, to hear more information on that package. So this is about responsible consumption, production and reuse. So as I said at the beginning, this package is quite close to my heart because as well as leading on the route map, I was also responsible for the content support for the consumption package. So it really reflects my areas of interest and previous experience. So the focus in this package is all about acknowledging that material consumption and waste are really the primary drivers of nearly every environmental problem that we're currently facing. And we want to change that narrative. So we want to challenge the current approach. We want to do this by improving product design, by mainstreaming reuse and repair, and by incentivising more sustainable choices. Okay, So in terms of what we've done so far, so within the route map document, you'll see there is a bit of a reflection of what's gone on before, almost setting the scene, because we're trying to build on that and we're trying to extend where good practice has already happened. So in this space, we've had the Circular Economy Investment Fund. So that's been in place since 2014, and that's to support circular and reuse business models. We've had the carrier bag charges, which we're all very familiar with now. They've been in place for quite a few years. We've had the ban on plastic stemmed cotton buds that came into force in 2019, and obviously that's extended now recently in June. We have established the expert panel on environmental charging and other measures. That's pretty much laid out the foundations for our approach to reducing single-use consumption and set the intention that we have for the charging on single-use disposable beverages, which I'll talk about in a minute. We've got the plastic packaging tax. Obviously, that's UK-wide. That came in April of this year on materials with less than 30% recycled content. We've got the Green Claims Code that was published by DEFRA last year that provides guidance to businesses making environmental claims about their products. We've also got the UK regs on eco-design of energy consuming products. So that's the energy labelling and the right to repair for specified items. And also we're supporting the sharing libraries and repair projects, looking at increasing the total up to 100 by 2025. In terms of what we're doing at the moment, how active we are in this space, well, we've got the 70 million Recycling Improvement Fund that was launched last year. That includes support for local authorities to increase recycling, reuse, improving performance across the board. 20 million has been awarded so far to 13 local authorities to date. So we're really expecting some good things that will come through this particular funding programme. Also, we've had the single-use plastics ban. We legislated for this in 2021. The ban came in force on the 1st of June of this year. So that's expected to reduce demand for plastics and the impacts of plastics pollution in our environment. So it covers all the kind of iffy areas of plastic cutlery, straws, beverage stirrers, balloon sticks, and also the expanded polystyrene ranges. So in terms of what we're proposing in the consultation, we've got a number of different things. This is actually probably the heaviest package within all of them in terms of the number of measures that we're putting forward. So the first one is taking powers to introduce charges for environmentally damaging items. So this is about having an incentive, a really kind of strong incentive to do things differently, to choose reusable alternatives or avoid certain products altogether. So we have had success with this approach before, obviously with the plastic bag tax. We saw that 80% in the first year alone.
Appear to maybe have lost you. I don't know if it's like that for the other panelists or if it's just me. Hopefully we can get Jane back in a moment. So apologies for the interruption there. She was just getting into the detail of the proposals as well, but we have had a few questions that have come in. So perhaps we could turn to, are you back, Jane?
Yep.
Oh, you're back. That's good. So we can keep the questions on ice then.
I'm literally just keeping everyone on their toes.
It just cut off before you were talking about the charging and how it's been successful for carrier bags.
Brilliant. Perfect. Okay. I didn't talk to myself for too long after that then. We're also looking at introducing a charge for single-use disposable cups by 2025. Again, really strong support for this in the 2019 consultation on the CE bill. It complements obviously what's coming through on the single-use plastics directive, and we are looking at moving this forward towards secondary legislation as well. We also want to develop a prioritised approach to charges and bans on other environmentally damaging products from 2025. So this is looking at what else can we do? What other scope is there out there to bring some new measures in? We do need to be very mindful and have a real good understanding, I think, on impacts and implications on businesses and sectors if we take this approach forward, but it's something we're really, really open to considering. We also want to publish a prioritised approach to product stewardship by 2024. You know, we know a lot of the waste issues that we have and the resource challenges that we have happen way before they become products. You know, they're at that kind of design phase, they're during the kind of project inception. So we want to build on EPR schemes, go beyond recycling. We want to use different tools to drive reuse and repair, and we want to reduce the need for new products. We also want to develop and publish how we're going to do this. So we're going to identify 3 priority products for further action. We want to use a range of different environmental criteria. We want to work with industry, and we want to take forward legislative measures where necessary, if we feel that they're appropriate. And we're going to build this approach within the circular economy strategy that's being proposed within the CE Bill consultation. So that will set the strategic direction for us. We also want to take powers to set statutory consumption reduction targets. So, it's an ambitious approach here, but we do believe that there is merit in developing some kind of statutory targets to tackle consumption behaviour, as well as other aspects of the circular economy, such as focusing on reuse and recycling. We fully appreciate that if we move forward with this, we would need to underpin any target development with robust monitoring and an indicator framework that's very clear and effective. But this is very consistent with calls from the European Parliament for a suite of indicators to kind of really manage this approach. We also want to investigate the feasibility of setting reuse targets by 2025. So we know there's a lot of reuse activity in place at the moment. We know it can tend to be ad hoc. We know it can be a little bit niche in places. We want to sort of acknowledge that and think, is it appropriate to set reuse targets? Will it help? Will it drive us in the right direction? So we really want to investigate this. And again, we fully appreciate that we'd need a robust monitoring framework in place if this was taken forward. We would also need to establish a baseline of reuse activity. We want to identify ways to expand business models that prolong product lifespan by 2025. Well, the reason why we want to do this is we recognise that there is substantial innovation already underway in this space. There is support already available, but we want to build on this. What else can we do to engage with businesses to understand where additional support could really help and could maximise impact and growth in this particular area? So this could include skills and training. It could look at addressing high startup costs and other barriers to market entry, or it could look at how we can incentivise sustainable consumer and producer choices. We also are looking to keep pace with the EU Sustainable Product Initiative. So the European Commission has recently proposed a range of different provisions under the Sustainable Product Initiative, including the banning the destruction of unsold goods and development of digital product passports. And the CE Bill does include a specific proposal on the introduction of a ban for the destruction of unsold goods. So we want to work with UK administrations to take forward any joint action in this space and utilise the powers that we have there. We want to develop support measures to further improve the reuse experience for consumers. So again, we want to build on, there has been a significant amount of progress made in this area in terms of accessibility, acceptability, perception of reused items, but we want to identify what package of measures would really help optimize the reuse experience. So we can look at expanding existing tools, such as the Revolve Support Programme and certification. We could look at the creation of hubs, superstores, bringing together the whole repair, resale facilities for a range of different products and services. We look at integrating options, business models, that type of thing. So we're really open, but the idea is how can we really enhance what's already going on out there? And the last but not least is a national comms campaign. So this is focused on sustainable consumption specifically. So we'd look to identify what are the key messages that we need to get out there, which organisations are best placed to help us deliver those messages. We'd look to commence communications activities from 2023. We want to build on successful household recycling and food waste reduction campaigns that have gone on in 21 and are underway in 22. And we'll also use the launch of the route map and the CE Bill to take this forward. So that in a nutshell is what we're offering in terms of the route map and the CE Bill. Very happy to take your questions on these.
Thanks very much, Jane. That was a really in-depth run through once again. So thank you for that. A few questions have come in. So if I could just start with maybe a question, it's on reuse. So I could throw this one out to our reuse experts on the panel. So for example, Michael, you're the head of Circular Community Scotland, a reuse organisation that already strives to promote reuse across the sector. With the consultation in package 1, how can the reuse experience be further improved for consumers?
I think we've come a long way, but I think we've got a long way to go. I mean, I often say that until it's socially acceptable to say give a new parent a reuse present for their child's birth, and that be seen as a really good thing. There's still so much stigma around reuse. So I think there's a few legs to the chair, and no one of them will do it, but all of them together, I think, will make a big difference. I really welcome investigating and looking at reuse targets. I think at the moment, reuse is a bit of a second-class cousin to recycling in the public's eyes, but also in in investment and local authorities and private enterprise in how they look at it. So I think reuse targets, if you want to do something, set a target, and then obviously don't just do that, but that's a good start. I think then measures, I think co-design around local authorities and what recycling and reuse provision should be like across Scotland, because it's a bit of a postcode lottery at the moment as to what the provision is for reuse, how easy it is, how convenient it is, how attractive it is, the volume going through. I think I would always say investment is one of those legs as well, both at local authority sites, but also in reuse themselves. I mean, we're calling for reuse credits in terms of payments for the volume of reuse that's being done, and I think you don't necessarily need primary legislation for that, but that is something we would love to see. And I think marketing and comms about it, and so the talk of comms campaign on consumption, I think that's really important. I mean, if there was consistent facilities for reuse, Greece has just passed a law that every town over 20,000 inhabitants must have a reuse provision. Spain's just passed a law that says 50% of their waste contracts should go to charities and social enterprises, i.e. reuse sector, to drive up reuse. So yeah, I think those measure of things. Once there's a consistent provision of how to do it, I think then a comms campaign could actually work. And one final comment might be a segue over to Sam. I think Revolve's played a part in this in the past, and Revolve needs to play a part in this in the future as well, in terms of the standard that shops operate at, that secondhand isn't second best. It can be a fantastic offering. So yeah, maybe there's a segue to Sam there.
Yeah, I'll just pass over seamlessly to Sam for any further points on that.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with everything that Michael's said, and it's this kind of notion that it should be normal to buy secondhand. I totally agree with that, and that's what we've been striving for with the Revolve programme, is to support the sector to not only just meet standards to make everything safe and make sure the goods are of quality, but that the whole thing is accessible. And by accessible, I mean that people will want to shop there. So the shopping environment of shopping secondhand should be as easy and as good. In fact, I think it's better for a number of reasons than the traditional kind of new products on the high street. So that's certainly what we're looking to do, so that the standards are there and the support is there through the Revolve programme, and we'll continue to build on that and to grow and to help a larger number of reuse operations to do better. But also we need to think about the scale. So to Michael's point, it needs to be easy to shop secondhand, and that is all about volume. If you're looking for a chair, you're looking for something really specific, it needs to be close to hand, it needs to be accessible. You need to know you're going to find what it is that you're looking for where you are. And that encompasses lots of different points that are in the route map. It's about capture. It's about how we kind of deal with the throughput of products and how we then communicate to the public where these things are and that it's socially acceptable to do this. So it's a really holistic approach.
And just on that point, because you made that point too, Michael, about communication, Zero Waste Scotland did launch their first responsible consumption campaign just before Christmas at the time of COP26, which won an award a couple of weeks ago. It was around everything we buy has a carbon cost, just trying to ram up that message of the 80% of our carbon footprint comes from how we consume and what we consume. So I think all the more work that can be done on that, the better. There has been another question on reuse that's come in via Twitter. So I'll just throw this one out to the panel, and whoever wants to take it, just go for it. The question comes as from Tamsin. How can we promote cross-industry reuse when there is nothing in the consultations about establishing common Scottish markets for all types of business waste? I don't know if anyone wants to take that one, perhaps. Michael?
So the question I'm seeing in the chat is a little bit different to that in terms of targets for reuse. I think we need to target for reuse to give it a correct priority, and I think that should apply in businesses and individuals. And I think the other thing I think is part of it is preparation for reuse as well, which is a bit of a EU distinction, but there's a degree of the easiest thing in the world would be a preparation for reuse target that says of all the waste going to local authority sites, this percentage should be set aside for reuse at least, and then monitoring that. I don't think we know how much we do at the moment. So I think I really support what Jane said around data fact finding. We need, just going like that and making up a number that doesn't really help anyone. We need a target that's stretching but achievable, not too easy but not impossible. And I think so that would be my answer to reuse targets.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to add anything to Michael's response on that?
Just a quick one on the targets. I mean, setting reuse targets is really quite challenging, and we know that. And actually looking elsewhere at where other countries have either sort of started to go down this route or attempted, there is a distinction, as Michael said, between preparation for reuse and actual reuse. I guess as a tool to sort of stimulate and push up from recycling into that next tier, it does feel like it could be an effective approach, but it is a challenge. And actually that would be one of the things in terms of looking at the feasibility of reuse targets is what would your baseline look like? And exactly as the point being made, actually, do we know what percentage of waste is currently reusable? Well, that's a really good question. And actually, is there a responsibility then on producers, as part of the requirements on them to think about what proportion of their products are reusable and on what basis and how many times, and all those type of things. So it's like an ongoing dialogue, really, I think, with all of the different sectors as to what would be most appropriate. But just because it's challenging, I would kind of advocate for not shying away from it and thinking, well, let's consider it, let's investigate it. But we do acknowledge it's not going to be easy.
No, definitely not. And that what you were saying there, Jane, does that not touch a wee bit on extended producer responsibility as well?
Yeah, and we're looking all the time at like beyond EPR and thinking, how much further could we go? What other measures could we put into place? What other kind of demands could be required on producers? And it's supply chain management. That's the whole thing that we're looking at the whole time, rather than just it's waste. Let's just be thinking about it as a waste product. It's not. It's bringing in the whole supply chain and looking at how we can do things differently and how we can do it better. Equally, then, how can we cover the cost for that, which is where EPR comes into its own.
Yeah, and extending a product's lifespan as well, which is another one of the measures that you touched on in your presentation.
Yeah, I've just seen the question, actually, the sort of original question, Catherine, that you raised about promoting cross-industry reuse when there's nothing in consultation about establishing common Scottish markets for all types of business waste. It's a good question. And actually, if we have gaping holes in there, flag them, please. You try and produce something that you think you're crossing off all the kind of different areas and remits, and if we're missing things, it's a valid point. So feel free to flag.
I was going to say that exactly. That's part of this whole series of webinars, and the consultation process itself is to flag where there might be ideas for consideration. So absolutely. Sam, did you want to make a point?
Yeah, I was just going to say, for me, actually, both of these questions are kind of linked in that when we talk about items being available for reuse or what is potentially reusable, it brings to mind for me the difference between things that are coming directly from households and directly from businesses versus once they hit the waste stream, and the percentage goes way down at that point. And I think we have a tendency to think of taking things from that end, and what we would really want to do is having people think at source, obviously to stop the waste occurring in the first place. But once they have it, where is that going, and not just put it into the system or the existing system. So I think that's a really good idea about the business waste. We don't really have anything that's suitable at the moment at scale for cross-business swapping of goods, or to think, and that absolutely should be in there, actually. So it'd be good to hear more about what people think that could look like.
Just for the benefit of the panel and the audience, the other question that had come in, because there was two questions about reuse there, was from Andrew on what sort of targets could be set for reuse. Do we know what percentage of waste is currently reusable, and what we might look to then commit to ensuring a certain amount does go on to be used again? So that's just really for the benefit of those watching this broadcast who don't have the benefit of seeing the questions. Kate, I saw your hand was up there if you wanted to come in with any other points.
Just to add, I think, back to Sam's earlier point about that accessibility angle, the thing that I think that question that came in through Twitter about the cross-industry connection, there's a role here for technology to play as well that I think is sort of underutilized, and it would be interesting to see that explored, as how we create these reliable platforms for sharing materials. And that's something that has started to change, is that as we are gathering more data, we can see that businesses do want to engage cross-industry, and that these platforms are starting to spring up to allow for that to happen. I think more investment in that space could be really interesting to actually support business who want to do this and want to take that step.
That's great, Kate. Thanks very much. Jane, sorry.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to jump in on that. That's such a good point, and it's something that we have considered for some waste streams. So for C and D, it's definitely a consideration, because it's so heavy. It's the carbon elements attached to some parts of it. So we've thought about platforms in that mechanism, but actually looking much wider than that. Why should we just be focusing on specific material streams or specific sectors? And potentially procurement can play a really strong part in this and help drive that forward. At the moment, we focus on public sector procurement, but actually, the public sector purse is a really big one, buying in services and products, but it's thinking kind of beyond that, and that can help stimulate some of those technology investments. And really, it's that ease and the convenience, isn't it? It's providing those opportunities and that kind of symbiosis and linking in different organizations in a really clear, sort of effective way, so people choose that rather than the buying new.
And just for the benefit of our audience, Jane, I think you mentioned C&D waste there. Were you talking about construction?
Yes, construction, demolition.
Demolition. That's good. I picked you up right. I'm not very good at acronyms all the time, so just so we're absolutely clear. Maybe just moving on to a more general question, I could perhaps put this one to Kate first, in representing the views of the Climate 2050 group. Which measures within sort of package 1 do you think are the most vitally important, of which Jane outlined?
So from package 1, there was a lot that I personally was really excited to see. I've been working as a circular economy consultant for quite a few years. But obviously today I'm here to represent the 2050 Climate Group, and that is a big network of young people across Scotland. So what we're doing, as I mentioned at the beginning, is gathering the feedback from our members over the next month or so. But speaking personally, I think I suppose it's like there's two sides to it. I was excited to see the different charges and bans coming in, but also a bit hesitant around using charging as one of the main levers in package 1. I think we know that it can be effective, but it's quite a blunt policy instrument, and it's a good start. But then I think throughout package 1, then we saw that there's more focus on communications and culture change, which I think is a really key part of actually that coming back to accessibility and bringing people with us on this journey. So I was really excited to see some of the content around promoting sharing libraries and more reuse cafes. And that touches back to my point as well, that we are hearing from our young people, is that they want to see opportunities for them to develop their own skills and to learn new skills that they can put into being part of the circular economy. So I think that's really crucial, is kind of making space, accessible space on our high streets for that to happen. And then the wider communications focus is obviously really crucial, and comes back to what Michael was saying earlier as well.
Yeah, and if I could just ask perhaps the same question of yourself, Michael, in terms of package 1 measures. I mean, you might have an obvious bias towards the reuse measures, because that's your everyday job. But is there anything in particular you think's really, really important, or anything that's missing indeed?
Obviously, most of our members are involved in reuse, so you're right to flag that we would probably make that point. And I think I just want to circle around to a comment that Jane made linked to this, which is that do fill in the consultation, because we responded to the 2019 consultation, our members did, and I obviously that wasn't able to go through because of COVID, but I'm kind of really encouraged by the fact that this consultation has actually learned a lot from that last one. I mean, I wish it was past 2 years ago, that would have been great, but it has actually changed a lot, and there's a lot more strength and ambition in it, and I think that's a really positive transition. And some of the measures in it were from, I know from the consultation, people, us and others saying, do more, do this, like the product ban, for example. So that excites me, and I think therefore I see this as a real relevant process for us and everyone on the call to engage in. Yes, I like what things that I see as putting reuse on a level playing field with recycling, and of course we want to promote it above recycling. I think some of the powers that could be used to apply targets, that could be apply bans, could apply charges, is sort of the devil will be in the detail and how they're used. So I think a surgeon's scalpel or a sledgehammer and the difference between those and how they deliver the change that's needed. It would be, you could easily see a scenario where it's done badly or a scenario where it's done well. I would include product stewardship and EPR in that. One of our concerns on that would be with EPR that it totally wipes out the social enterprise and charity sector who are doing reuse with particular materials, because big companies just take over. But I think we need to move forward on this agenda, and the main thing I'm excited about is I see ambition and I see a determination to really grapple with some thorny subjects that maybe haven't been done before. And I would include in that tackling consumption and being a comms campaign run by Zero Waste Scotland. That's not a popular message always, maybe buy less or change how you consume things. But I think we need to have these serious adult to adult conversations if we're going to combat climate change.
Absolutely. And I think, your point about ambition is a valid one. We've had a few comments regarding why consult, why not just take action now and go ahead and make these changes. I don't know if that's one for you, Jane, on the importance of these consultations and why it's so important to have your say. Perhaps
Yeah, thanks for that. I think because it's about commitments that everyone has to make, we have to work together for this. So rather than it being, a set of actions or instructions or legal requirements that are just imposed, we need people to work together. And to do that, we need to find some common ground on what we think will work well. And plus, it's really complex. There isn't a single answer to this. And we have to be conscious all of the time for unintended consequences, overlaps, overlays, and thinking it through. So the consultation is really, really important for that, to try and really sort of draw out if there's any issues that we haven't thought of, or any opportunities that we're missing. That's probably much more of an important issue from my perspective in Zero Waste Scotland, is what we're missing that we really could be grabbing and running with now. It doesn't take away from the fact that time is pressing. And we will be working really hard once the consultation closes to get things moving, so things are not sitting around and we're not kind of musing over it for long periods of time. We've got research underway now. It's although we're in the consultation period, it's still a very active period, a very kind of thoughtful period. So it's just really crucial that all stakeholders have their say and tell us their views, and then we can move forward collectively. And because what we're asking for is super ambitious as well. If you reflect on this and look at other resource policies that are out there at the moment, this is super ambitious. So in order to get to what we need to do and deliver it well, we need to take everyone with us.
Absolutely. We're coming to the end of the series of live questions that we've had, but I just wanted to give the panel the opportunity to make any final closing remarks before we finish up for today.
Well, I'll just go first as a plea, just to say, do take part in the consultation. We really do want to hear your views. And if anyone thinks of anything when they've gone off this and they wish they'd asked it, then just get in touch. We're open. This is the whole process. It's open and transparent. We want to engage with people. So don't hold back if there's anything else you want to raise once we're through this webinar.
Thank you. Michael?
Let's be ambitious. Let's do it together. A bit of a cliche, but do fill in the consultation. We ran an event for our members on this topic a couple of weeks ago. The Minister, Lorna Slater, was at it, and I felt there was a genuine desire to be told where we should go further. And so that's my challenge I'd throw out to the people on the call. If there's something missing, suggest it. Let's have this as the strongest, most ambitious circular economy bill it can be. I mean, I said my son's 18, just going off to university, 18 years time. I want him to grow up in a world, and I'm sure you would all resonate if you've got children, in a world where we have combated climate change, we have achieved net zero, and we live in a fair and equitable and just world. And the circular economy, as technical as it sometimes is a key tool, if not one of the most key tools to achieving that. So let's get it done.
Absolutely, we all need to start living circular. So we are definitely coming to the end now of this live webinar. So if you've missed any bits, then don't worry, you can watch back later on the Zero Waste Scotland website, and also will be available on our social channels as well. You can go to the website address zws.scot/webinar and then the number 1 to watch back later. And as Jane said, if you've got any further questions, then please do carry on submitting those via the email address that we've set up, livingcircular@zerowastescotland.org.uk. I'd also like to do a little plug for our next webinar, which is on construction on the 21st of July at 1 o'clock. So please do feel free to join us for that. And if you visit our website, you'll find a calendar reminder that you can add to your calendar. And there is information on the Zero Waste Scotland website about the consultations, and more information will be getting published next week. So do keep your eye on that. And you can also check out the Scottish Government's website, where the consultations are hosted and where you can actually go online and complete them. So please do that as well before the 22nd of August, which is the deadline when they close. So for now, I'd just like to thank Kate, Michael, Sam and Jane for their time today, especially on such a warm, sunny day. I think this is the first day of summer that we've had. So big thanks to you all, and thank you for joining us wherever you've been joining us from. And just please complete the consultations.